welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy, sometimes Mouse, and I talk about books and book-related things. Today I am giving you my March wrap-up. As per usual, here are my normal disclaimers. If you hear a fan, it is because it is hot and I live in Texas. If you hear animal sounds, it is because I live in a zoo and cannot control the animals I live with, which includes, you know, a lizard, a bird, 3 dogs, and 3 cats. And I'm probably forgetting someone, but I think that's everyone. So if you hear sounds, obviously they're a little bit outside of my control. The only animal that listens to me is Cotter, and y'all know she has a mind of her own. So anyway, moving on to our wrap-up. Let's go ahead and get started with the stats for the month. This month I managed to read less books than last month, which is great. And also weird though, because March has felt fucking long. It felt so long. It felt like it never ended. I don't know why, but it has been the longest month. Anyway, stats, let's go. I read 33 books. In March, I read 3,831 pages. I listened to 231 hours and 3 minutes, which is about the equivalent of 9 days and 15 hours. My average rating for the month was a 3.9, which is the same. Last month it was a 3.8, so this month it was a 3.9. My average pages per day was 117.6. My average hours per day was 7 hours, 30 minutes, and 5 seconds, and that's audiobooks. I acquired 4 books, which you're probably thinking, Andy, isn't that more than you said you would acquire? No, because one was a gift, one was $4, and the other 2 were with Audible credits that I just had on lock. So, but either way, I only spent $4.65. So, I read 12 library books, and 8 of the books I read were rereads this month. My camera overheated, so if you hear fan, it's because I've now set the fan to like on a rotating to hit the camera, so hopefully it does not overheat because I really would like to get this filmed today. I'm gonna talk about my ratings a little bit. I, in the last 2 months, have read a couple of books that were just super good, but in both months it has been very hard to pick a top 5 because I just don't feel like I read 5 amazing books that I feel valid enough to tell you guys about. Like, even in my top 5 for this month, I have included a book that I didn't rate 5 stars. I think maybe 2 books that I didn't know, just one that I didn't rate 5 stars. And so it's a little bit, I don't know. I feel like I'm just on a roll with just books. It's okay. So we'll see if next month is better. I know that May, which is my birthday month, is when a lot of really good books are coming out that I'm really excited for, and I swear to fucking God, if I get let down again, almost gonna sue. Insert that TikTok sound. I don't know how I would manage to do that.
Almost gonna sue!
Anyway, of the 33 books that I read this last month, 23 of them were audiobooks, 6 of them were ebooks, 4 of them were physical books. I read 1 book that was between 600 and 700 pages, 4 books that were between 401 and 500 pages, 4 books that were between 301 and 400 pages, and 1 book that was between 201 and 300 pages. No really short and no over 700 page books. I think that's actually a pretty good example of what my reading generally looks like anyway, and just so you guys know, I don't include any of the books that I strictly listen to audio. If I just listen to it, I do not include the page count or anything, so that is just books that I either read via ebook or physically, and their page lengths. Of all of those, I read 3 middle grade books, 10 adult books, and 20 young adult books. So this one wasn't like a great month for my trying to read more adult books. I'm still, for the year, have read more adult books than young adult books, but a lot of the books that I read that were young adult this month were rereads, and then those books sequels that just came out. So it was kind of like a refresh and then the sequel. So I don't know if that counts, but that's why that number is so skewed this month. Now we're going to talk about my book blanket. I am hoping that I can get this footage for you guys, so I haven't been able to work on my book blanket. It is almost completely updated to where I'm currently at with the number of books that I've read this month. However, my hands are a little bit fucked up right now because I have been crocheting too much, and so I have not been able to work on the book blanket beyond what I'm currently at. So hopefully I get the footage for the book blanket and can include it here. I will also talk about the genres and how much time it's taking me on the blanket and that kind of thing, again, here.
This month I read 12 fantasy, 10 sci-fi, 5 horror, 3 romance, 2 thrillers, 1 contemporary, and 1 non-fiction. I also took some footage of the blanket around me. I'm a 5'1" person, so hopefully that gives an indicator of how large this blanket is. I did moss stitch the end just like I have before. Also, this has now taken me 25 hours, 29 minutes, and 22 seconds, and it is 117 rows wide. Look at it go. Amazing.
And those are the stats. Now then, let's talk about the top books of the month and the bottom book of the month. So my top 5 books of the month includes 2 books that Art recommended and 1 book that I read only because Art mentioned another book by the author. So basically, thanks Art. I feel like my TBR and my wrap-up for this month have become like Art hype letters in video form. The first book that I have listed here, these are not in order of like best to less good. It's just in whatever order I grabbed them off of my reading history. So first we have The Quiet at the End of the World by Lauren James. This is, if you've read The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He, then it's kind of similar in context here, but essentially all of the humans are dying. There has been this infertility plague that has hit the planet and everyone is dying. This book has good representation of LGBTQ people and the way that that kind of has also affected them. I don't want to spoil the twist in this book, so I am not going to talk too much about it, but I will say with this book, and there's one other book that I felt this way about too. I was reading it and I was like, this is fine, it's just kind of slow. I don't understand Art's hype about it. And then the twist happened and I was like, okay, 5-star read, done. That's it, it's a 5-star read. So, you know, take that advice that it might seem slow and it might seem, why would this be recommended? Why would this be a top 5 read? Trust me, alright? Just trust me. Trust me. Then we have Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, which is the book that I previously mentioned. Art got a different book by Eric LaRocca, and I was like, oh, I saw someone on TikTok talking about Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and saying like, I should have read the trigger warnings. Holy shit, I should have read the trigger warnings because this is one of the most disturbing books I've ever read. Which, if you like body horror, it's probably, if you've read body horror like I have, it's probably like top 5, but definitely not the most disturbing. But it is my new Tender is the Flesh. If you don't know about me, if I find out that you like horror books, and specifically gory body horror, I'm gonna recommend Tender is the Flesh. And that's how I gauge how much body horror. What can you handle? So then I make everyone I know that's like, I wanna read horror. I'm like, read this, it's short. That's my like selling point, it's short. So this is my new Tender is the Flesh, where if someone tells me they like body horror, I'm gonna make them read this fucking book. Because first off, the audiobook on 1x speed is like 2 hours. Super short. The novella is short. It's a snack. It's a snack. But if you want to gauge how much body horror you can handle, how much horror you can handle, this is the book. Again, like the book before, it's kind of like there are some weird things and you're just like, what? But it's kind of slow, like you're not sure why this has gotten, like, why did people say this is super disturbing? And then you get it, and then you get it. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. Well, actually I'm gonna say one other thing. What have you done today to deserve your eyes? Because this book has also taught me that I can now say that without context and make everyone in the room uncomfortable. So what have you done today to deserve your eyes? The next book is A Far Wilder Magic by Allison Saft. This is a cishet romance fantasy book that I read and enjoyed. And it felt like eating a warm cup of soup in front of the fireplace on a really cold day with all of your friends and playing a drinking game with them. That is what this book felt like reading. I loved the characters. I loved the way it had discussions over immigration and the way that we treat immigrants of different cultures, and the way that we excuse certain behaviors just because it's easier for us than to correct others. I enjoyed the magic in the game, the alchemy in the game. I enjoyed the underlying plot. I enjoyed the romance. I thought that it was well written and incredibly interesting. And I think that Alison Sapp did a fantastic job. I genuinely think that it's an enjoyable romance book where honestly, the romance didn't ever make me be like, ugh. You know? There were points where they were like, this guy turns me on, that's fucking weird, they're gross, and I hate them, ew. And it made me laugh, but that's it. It was a really good book. And that's all I'm gonna say because I'm ashamed that this is on my top 5. Then we have Obscura by Joe Hart. This is a sci-fi book in which there is a plague hitting everyone where they essentially go through Alzheimer's all of a sudden. Like, little kids go through it, very healthy adults go through it, and it is traumatizing. Obviously, a lady who's also a drug addict because her husband has died from it, and then her daughter is going through it, so like, you gotta do what you gotta do, you know, to cope. And so she goes off to space to they're gonna do something with research for this, something about time travel, or not time travel, teleportation? Yes. Anyway, something along those lines. And it's really hard to talk more about this book because I really don't want to ruin the twist, because again, there's a twist. There's a couple of twists. And essentially, this is one of those books where you're not really sure if what is happening is actually happening, or if our main character is if the drugs that she's taking have been tampered with, and she's hallucinating and imagining things. Like, you're not really 100% sure, and it is well done because she has an open dialogue about her being an addict. So it's just kind of interesting and well done, because sometimes I feel like we talk about drug usage and stuff in these kinds of books, or alcoholics and stuff, and not trusting what they see, and it's just not done in a good way. And I think that this one was done in a good way, and when you look at the traumas that she's gone through, you're kind of just like, yeah, homie, whatever you gotta do to take care of yourself, because like, I would have a hard time with that. So yeah. Then my last top book of the month is not one I expected to be a top book of the month by any means, and that is a nonfiction. That is Cultish by Amanda Montell. Cultish is a book about the language of fanaticism and how we use cult-like fanatical languaging in conversations that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So we use it in makeup packaging and branding, we use it in fitness packaging and branding. SoulCycle, Peloton, etc. Those brands use languaging that you can also find in churches and cults and conspiracy theory groups, activist groups, guru mentality yoga groups, and how, from a linguistic point of view, those things affect us and our mental health and the way that we proceed. And I thought that whole process was really, really interesting, and I thought that the discussion of the extremes, from extremes cults, from pyramid schemes, from makeup branding, I thought looking at all of this from a linguistic point of view and how it manipulates us as humans and how that works in general for us and why it works and why it doesn't work on everybody, I thought that all of that was really, really interesting, especially given our current climate with politics and fitness, all of it, honestly. Diet culture even uses this language of fanaticism. Work uses this language of fanaticism. If you work for a corporate company, they probably use language of fanaticism and cult-like languages. Culture? Corporate companies that have culture? No, they're using that same language of like, welcome home. Nah, I have a home, and it is not this place. Now we're going to talk about my worst book of the month, and I have to give some disclaimers here. I DNF'd this book around the last day of February, maybe the first day of March. Because of that, I was not able to talk about it in my February video. If I had been reading it before I filmed my February video, I would have chosen it, maybe. Close tie anyway with The Hunting Wives. Close tie. except I finished The Hunting Wives, so. I also want to disclaim that I am really bummed that this is on my worst read of the month, and I'm going to have a couple of other disclaimers, but I need to just go ahead and tell you what book it is. That is going to be Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. Now, you guys know The Wolf and the Woodsman is a book that I have hyped endlessly. I fucking love that book. So I like Ava Reid's writing, and I have followed Ava Reid on Twitter for quite some time, and I enjoy the discussions that Ava Reid brings to the table. This book is an adult horror, and when I had seen it marketed on social media, and the way that NetGalley talked about it, because I got it as an ARC, it felt more like a dark fantasy with horror aspects. Did I check on Goodreads to confirm that it was a horror before dark fantasy? Yeah, but also Goodreads really likes to tell me something is a thriller when it's a contemporary, so do I believe Goodreads? No. Did I scroll down and look at my friends' reviews for it? Yes. Did I scroll down and read the comments for Goodreads? No. Because I like Ava Reid's writing, and I was excited for the book and excited to read more from Ava Reid. I really like their prose, her prose. I think she's an incredible writer. What I didn't know was the content of the book hits on several topics that I personally am not comfortable reading. Or if I had known that this content was in the book, I would not have requested the book because I would have understand that from a horror perspective, this book is not for me. Because I know what things I like in horror and what things I don't like in horror. It wasn't even a matter of being triggered, because honestly, when it comes to horror, it's a little bit hard to do that for me. I'm not asking anybody to go out of their way to try and find something that'll trigger me, I'm just saying. The content and trigger warnings for this book can only be found, as of recording this right now, March 25th, can only be found if you scroll all the way down to the comments on Goodreads and find Ava Reid's comment. It is then below 1 or 2 paragraphs with a fair warning about don't use the content and trigger warnings to be a guidance for why you should or shouldn't read the book, etc. Don't dismiss this book just because of the trigger warnings. Sure, okay, that's not why I look at trigger warnings, so great. But I didn't know that until I was ready to DNF the book. There is no content warning on NetGalley. There is no content warning in the descriptor of Goodreads. There is no content warning in the book. There's an epigraph that means nothing to me and was mentioned in a Twitter thread where Ava Reid was frustrated with reviewers. So I want to give all of those disclaimers to describe my frustrations going into the book. My battery's gonna die, so I have to go get another battery. I'll be right back. I swear to God, if I have one more camera issue during filming this video, y'all are not getting a video. Sorry. Again. I've had 2 camera batteries die and my camera overheat twice, so cool. Anyway, with those disclaimers out of the way, I also, one last disclaimer. I also want to preface that I DNF'd this well before the conversation, the Twitter thread, etc. came up. So this book would have been on this list to begin with. The only reason I give all of these disclaimers is because I want y'all to understand that I didn't like this book. And it has nothing to do with the author. That's literally it. I just want to make sure that that is understood before we proceed. Anyway, the reason I didn't like Juniper and Thorn was, 1, the inherent over-sexualization. Now, this is just because of my own personal preference within books. I don't enjoy overt sexualization. I have DNF'd other horror books for the exact same thing. If a book discusses sexual things in excess as a trauma victim, and as someone on the A spectrum, and as someone who has been in a whole lot of therapy for certain things that have happened to me that make me uncomfortable with certain sexual things, I am uncomfortable with those as a horror aspect. Because for me, it is not something I enjoy reading. I'm not trying to say that for other survivors of any kind of abuse, I'm not saying that they don't enjoy like the opposite effect, essentially. I know that it is true. I've done enough research on my own, and my therapist and I have had enough conversations, my old therapist, have had enough conversations about how trauma presents differently in different people. And so their behavior is different. And I'm not attaching any shame to that. And I hate that I'm having to disclaim all of this shit. I can't just tell you why I didn't like the book. I just don't want anybody to get mad at me unnecessarily and take words out of my mouth. So for me personally, if I had known that there was this specific flavor of content, I would not have picked the book up. I would have recognized, like, this isn't for me, and I wouldn't have read it. So innately over-sexualized and too gory. And this is, did y'all not hear me talk about things have gotten worse? I fucking love body horror and I love gore. However, there is overt descriptors of dismantling fairy tale creatures, which my brain classes in the same class as animals. And those things felt unnecessary. And it felt like they were distracting from the real problem with the book. And that is, at 60% into the book, I could not have honestly told you what the goal was. So when I'm reading a book, I am oftentimes looking for an end goal, whether it be spoken or not. I am trying to determine the character's motivations or goals or like something. Unfortunately, in Juniper and Thorn, by 60% in, I wasn't really sure where we were going. Yes, it does match the plot that's described in Goodreads. So I could read you the Goodreads descriptor and say this is what was happening. But as someone who was reading it actively, because of the kind of content that it had, and because of the intensity and consistency of that content, I was not able to process the plot in order to tell you fully what was going on. Because I would get 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe, of plot or character description or world buildings, and then I would get 2 or 3 pages of our main character's sexualized thoughts, intrusive thoughts, or something gory happening. I personally don't like that kind of plot layout in a book. It doesn't work well for me, especially as someone who is completely non-visual. I cannot see things in my head, so I am just reading sad fucking shit happening non-stop. And when I get to the parts of a book that are most important to me as someone who is incredibly non-visual, which is character development, world building, and plot, and there is almost none, and I am still recovering from trying to process the content that I don't enjoy reading, it's not going to be a book for me. And I can recognize that it is not a book for me. And I can recognize that it might be a book for others. 100%, and I can see how it would be. But for me, the plot, character development, and world building were not strong enough for me to have enjoyed this book. And again, if I had known what kind of content this book had, I would not have requested it or picked it up. I would have recognized, this one is not one for me. I'm bummed about it, but I know how to take care of my own mental well-being and how to recognize books that aren't made for me well enough that I am not going to pick up a book that's not made for me and then give it a negative review from somebody that I know put their heart and soul into a book. And so it kind of hurts my feelings to have to give all of these disclaimers and say all of these things and be like, look, I know this book was not meant for me, and I wouldn't have read it if I knew that, but I didn't. I was not given adequate warning that that's the kind of content this book had. And that's where my frustration lies. It is not me trying to attack any kind of survivors and how they process their trauma. It is not me trying to diminish their experiences and those experiences showing up in books in the form of intrusive thoughts, etc. I've been through it. I get it. And I'm someone whose own trauma presents in an anger format rather than an infantile format. And so I understand the inherent shame that comes from trauma sometimes, where your behavior is not necessarily something that you want to attach to yourself. The behavior that it causes you to exhibit. Over-sexualization, being aggressive, etc. I recognize that. Trust me, I do, from a first-hand experience. I'm frustrated because the discussion around the negative reviews on this book is, I'm a victim and you guys are not recognizing that I'm a victim, and therefore you are not understanding the context of the book. Many of those people wouldn't have picked the book up if they knew what was in it. I don't know. Talking about this has made me anxious now, so yeah, I'm probably gonna have to cut a lot of that out, and I'm sorry. That Twitter thread really made me upset as somebody who left a negative review, but not because I was attacking the author, but because I should have been given adequate warning as a survivor of trauma. And I'm sorry, but commenting on a Goodreads post, Goodreads buries that shit. I didn't see it until after I was DNFing it. So how did that help me? So I think it's already published, but I hope that maybe they've changed their minds and included some content and trigger warnings. I don't know. But that's it. That is my wrap up. And this part of the wrap up was really long, and it is going to be a bitch to edit. And now I'm anxious. I made myself anxious. I'm scared somebody's going to be mad at me for my frustrations. But that's how I feel. So, but that's my wrap up. If you liked this video, I'm sorry about the rant. When don't I rant? In my wrap-ups though. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. Do you agree or disagree with my conversation here? Am I wrong for feeling frustrated by this conversation? I also think that authors should stay out of reviewer spaces, but that's a whole other bag of worms I'm not going to open. But what are your thoughts? Are any of my top 5 books that you've read or want to read? Also, I do want to say look up the trigger warnings for Things Have Gotten Worse. Please look up the trigger warnings. I really, 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 really recommend that. I don't want anyone to get their feelings hurt or be triggered. And me be responsible for having recommended that book. When I say body horror, I mean it. Please look up the trigger warnings. Anyway, back to me closing out the video. If you didn't enjoy this video, let me know what I can do better in the comments down below if it has something to do with my opinions. Those are subjective. I can't really do much about that, and I'm sorry if you disagreed with me. That is an opinion, and it does not mean that either one of us are right or wrong. But if you did not like this video, let me know how I can make it better for you in the comments down below. Comments always help. I know it takes me a little while to respond to them, but it's because they're a little bit overwhelming sometimes, so thank you guys for your patience with my slow replying to stuff. I will see you guys again on Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time and Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time every single week. I hope that you guys are going to have a great rest of your day, rest of your week. Don't forget to take your meds, drink your water, and do something today to take care of yourselves. Okay, thanks, bye.